For many centuries, a great empire lay hidden from history. It was a powerful kingdom that rivaled ancient Egypt and Babylon. Yet its story was almost completely forgotten. This was the Hittite Empire, a civilization that rose to prominence in the ancient Near East. They were a people known for their strong kings, their skilled warriors, and their advanced laws. For a long time, the only mention of the Hittites came from a few scattered references in the Old Testament. These brief mentions hinted at a powerful people, but they did not reveal the true scale of their influence or the vastness of their kingdom. Historians and archaeologists had very little information to work with. The mystery of the Hittites began to unravel in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Archaeologists started to find clues in modern-day Turkey. They discovered ancient ruins and strange clay tablets. These tablets were covered in a language that no one had ever seen before. The slow and difficult work of deciphering these texts began. As scholars unlocked the secrets of the Hittite language, a forgotten world came back to life. They learned about the Hittites' powerful rulers, their complex religion, and their detailed system of government. The world was astonished to learn about an empire that had been a major player on the ancient world stage. The Hittites were not just another small kingdom of the ancient world, they were a true superpower of the late Bronze Age. Their empire stretched across a huge territory, and their influence was felt far and wide. They commanded large armies and controlled important trade routes. They made treaties with other great kings and fought epic battles that changed the course of history. The story of the Hittites is a tale of ambition, innovation, and power. It shows us how a determined group of people could build a lasting civilization in a harsh and competitive world. Understanding the Hittites helps us to see the ancient Near East in a new and more complete way. Today, as we piece together the fragments of their past, we see a civilization that was both unique and influential. The Hittites left behind a rich legacy of legal codes, religious texts, and diplomatic letters. These discoveries have given us a window into their world. They show us how the Hittites thought about justice, how they worshipped their gods, and how they managed their relationships with their neighbors. The story of the rediscovery of the Hittite Empire is a remarkable journey. It is a reminder that history is full of secrets waiting to be uncovered, and that even the most powerful empires can be lost to time, only to be found again thousands of years later. The Hittite Empire was born in a land of high plateaus and rugged mountains. This region is known as Anatolia, which is the large peninsula that makes up most of modern-day Turkey. The heartland of the Hittite kingdom was located on the central Anatolian plateau. This was a challenging environment with cold, snowy winters and hot, dry summers. The landscape was dominated by rocky hills and wide-open plains. This geography shaped the Hittite people and their way of life. The mountains provided natural defenses against invaders, making it easier to protect their cities. The plains, although arid, could be used for farming and raising livestock, which were the foundations of their economy. The Hittites established their civilization around 1650 BCE. This period is known as the Late Bronze Age, a time when many great empires were rising and falling across the Near East. The Hittite Old Kingdom was the first stage of their long history. During this time, they consolidated their power in central Anatolia and began to expand their territory. The Hittite Empire reached its peak between roughly 1400 and 1200 BCE, a period called the New Kingdom or the Hittite Imperial period. During these centuries, they were one of the most dominant forces in the region. Their control extended south into Syria and east towards Mesopotamia, bringing them into contact with other major powers. The location of the Hittite homeland was strategically very important. Anatolia was a bridge between Asia and Europe. It was also rich in natural resources, especially metals like copper, silver, and iron. The Hittites became masters of metalworking, which gave them a significant advantage. They could produce strong weapons for their armies and valuable goods for trade. Control over the metal resources and the trade routes that crossed their territory made the Hittites very wealthy and powerful. They were able to build great cities, support large armies, and engage in diplomacy with faraway kingdoms, all thanks to the strategic benefits of their Anatolian home. The geography of Anatolia also presented challenges that the Hittites had to overcome. The rugged terrain made communication and travel difficult within their own empire. It took a long time for messages and armies to move from one part of the kingdom to another. This required a well-organized government and a network of roads to hold the empire together. Furthermore, the land was not always fertile, and droughts could lead to severe food shortages. The Hittites were constantly working to manage their resources and ensure that their people had enough to eat. Their ability to thrive in this demanding land is a testament to their resilience and ingenuity. The center of the Hittite universe was their magnificent capital city, Hattusa. Located on a rocky outcrop in the heart of Anatolia, Hattusa was more than just a city. It was a fortress. It was surrounded by a massive double wall that stretched for over 6 kilometers. These powerful fortifications included towers, gates, and even an underground tunnel or postern that allowed soldiers to move secretly in and out of the city. The city was built on a sloping hill, with the royal citadel and temples located on the higher ground overlooking the residential areas below. This design made the city very defensible and demonstrated the power of the king and the gods who watched over the Hittite people. Daily life in Hattusa was organized and bustling. The city was home to a diverse population, including nobles, priests, soldiers, merchants, and artisans. The king and the royal family lived in a large palace complex within the citadel. This was the administrative heart of the empire, where government officials worked and important decisions were made. Below the Acropolis, the lower city was a maze of houses, workshops, and markets. People lived in modest mud brick houses built on stone foundations. Archaeologists have found evidence of various crafts, such as pottery making, weaving, and metalworking, showing that Hattusa was a busy center of production and commerce for the entire empire. Religion played a central role in the life of the city. Hattusa was filled with temples dedicated to the many gods of the Hittite pantheon. The largest of these was the Great Temple, a massive complex dedicated to the storm god of Hatti and the sun goddess of Arena, the two main deities of the state. This temple was not just a place of worship, it was also a major economic institution. It owned large amounts of land, employed many people, and stored vast quantities of grain and other goods. Religious festivals and ceremonies were major public events involving the king, priests, and the general population in grand processions and rituals that reinforced the social and cosmic order. Archaeological excavations at Hattusa have provided us with incredible insights into the Hittite world. The most important discovery was the finding of the royal archives. In the ruins of the royal palace and temples, archaeologists unearthed more than 30,000 clay tablets. These tablets were the official records of the empire. They contained everything from royal decrees and legal codes to diplomatic letters, myths, and religious texts. This vast library of information has allowed us to reconstruct Hittite history, language, and culture in amazing detail. It is because of these tablets, preserved for over 3,000 years in the ruins of Hattusa, that the story of the lost Hittite Empire could finally be told. At the very top of Hittite society was the king. The Hittite king was not just a political leader, he was also the chief priest, the supreme judge, and the commander-in-chief of the army. He was seen as the representative of the gods on earth. It was his duty to maintain order, ensure justice, and perform the correct religious rituals to keep the gods happy. If the king failed in his duties, it was believed that the gods would punish the entire land with famine, plague, or military defeat. The king's power was immense, but it was also a heavy responsibility. He ruled from the capital city of Hattusa, surrounded by a large court of officials, nobles, and family members. The Hittite government was a well-organized monarchy. The king was assisted by a council of elders or nobles known as the Pankus. In the early days of the Hittite kingdom, the Pankus had significant power and could even have a say in who became the next king. However, over time, as the empire grew, the power of the king became more absolute. The succession to the throne was meant to pass from father to son, but this often led to rivalries and conflicts within the royal family. To manage their vast empire, the Hittites developed a sophisticated bureaucracy. Governors were appointed to rule over different provinces, and a network of officials collected taxes, managed resources, and administered justice. Hittite society was structured like a pyramid. Below the king and the royal family were the nobles and the military elite. These were the people who owned large estates, held high-ranking positions in the government and led the army's chariot corps. Below them were the artisans, merchants, and farmers who made up the majority of the population. These were the free citizens of the Hittite kingdom. At the very bottom of the social ladder were the slaves. Slaves were often prisoners of war or people who could not pay their debts. However, Hittite law provided them with some basic rights, which was unusual for the ancient world. They could own property and even buy their freedom. One of the most remarkable achievements of the Hittites was their system of law. Archaeologists have discovered tablets containing the Hittite laws, which provide a fascinating look into their sense of justice. Compared to other ancient law codes like the Code of Hammurabi, the Hittite laws were surprisingly humane. They often favored payment of fines or compensation over brutal physical punishments. For example, instead of an eye for an eye, the Hittite laws would specify a payment of silver for causing an injury. This focus on restitution rather than revenge shows a society that valued order and fairness, and it is a key part of their enduring legacy. The Hittite Empire was forged in the crucible of war. Its rise to power was honestly driven by a formidable military machine that was one of the most effective of its time. The Hittite army was commanded by the king himself, who, by tradition, was expected to lead his troops into battle. The army was a well-organized force, composed of infantry soldiers and an elite corps of charioteers. The infantry were the backbone of the army, armed with spears, sickles, swords, and axes. They were trained to fight in disciplined formations and were, particularly skilled at siege warfare, using battering rams and siege towers to capture well-fortified enemy cities across Anatolia and Syria. The key to Hittite military success was the war chariot. The Hittites did not invent the chariot, but they really perfected its use in battle. Their chariots were lighter and faster than those of their rivals, such as the Egyptians. The Hittite chariot had its axle in the middle, which made it more stable on rough terrain. It carried a crew of 3, a driver, a warrior with a spear, and a shield-bearer to protect the other 2. This made the Hittite chariot a versatile, mobile fighting platform. In battle, large squadrons of chariots would charge at the enemy, breaking their formations and causing chaos. This powerful chariot force gave the Hittites a decisive edge on the battlefield for centuries. The Hittites used their military strength to build a vast empire. Their conquests began in their Anatolian homeland, where they subdued rival kingdoms and brought them under their control. Under ambitious kings like Hattusili I and Mursili I, the Hittites expanded southward into Syria, a rich and strategic region that was also coveted by other powers. One of their most famous military campaigns was the sack of Babylon in 1595 BCE. A Hittite army marched all the way to Mesopotamia, captured the great city of Babylon, and brought an end to the dynasty of Hammurabi. This daring raid showed the reach and power of the Hittite army and announced their arrival as a major force in the Near East. Warfare was not just about conquest. It was also a vital part of the Hittite economy. Military campaigns brought in enormous wealth in the form of plunder, including gold, silver, livestock, and other valuable goods. More importantly, war provided a constant supply of prisoners who became slaves. These slaves were put to work on large-scale construction projects, such as building temples and fortifications, and they also labored on the estates of the Hittite elite. This system allowed the Hittites to build their magnificent cities and support their complex society. The army, blessed by the storm god, was the engine that powered the Hittite imperial enterprise. The Hittites were a literate society that left behind a vast written record of their world. They adopted the cuneiform writing system from Mesopotamia, which used wedge-shaped marks pressed into wet clay tablets. They used this script to write their own Indo-European language, known today as Hittite. This is, interestingly, the oldest attested Indo-European language, making it a distant relative of English. A fact that really fascinated linguists when it was first deciphered. In addition to Hittite, the scribes in the capital city of Hattusa also wrote in Akkadian, which was the international language of diplomacy at the time. This allowed them to communicate with other great powers like Egypt and Babylon. The clay tablets discovered at Hattusa cover an astonishing range of subjects. They include royal annals that record the deeds of the kings year by year. There are also collections of laws that reveal their system of justice. We find diplomatic letters exchanged with foreign rulers and international treaties that show their complex relationships with other states. The archives also contain myths, legends, and epic poems that tell the stories of their gods and heroes. Furthermore, there are detailed instructions for religious rituals, prayers, and hymns. This rich body of texts provides an unparalleled window into the mind of an ancient civilization, telling us not just what they did, but also what they thought and believed. The Hittite religion was, well, complex and diverse. They famously referred to their own religion as the religion of 1,000 gods. This was because as they conquered other peoples, they often adopted the gods and goddesses of the defeated nations into their own pantheon. They believed that it was important to honor the local gods of the lands they ruled to ensure peace and stability. The most important deities in the state religion were the storm god of Hatti, who controlled the weather and brought victory in battle, and his consort, the sun goddess of Arena, who was the patroness of the king and the kingdom. The king, as chief priest, had to perform endless rituals to keep all these gods satisfied. Hittite religious beliefs really permeated every aspect of their lives. They believed that the gods communicated with humans through omens and dreams. Priests and priestesses were skilled in the art of divination, trying to interpret the will of the gods by examining the organs of sacrificed animals, observing the flight of birds, or analyzing dreams. They believed that illness, famine, and defeat were signs of divine anger, caused by ritual impurity or the failure of the king to perform his duties correctly. Many of their religious texts are prayers in which the king asks the gods for forgiveness and tries to find out what he has done wrong. This constant effort to please a vast and honestly often unpredictable pantheon of gods was a central preoccupation of Hittite culture. As the Hittite Empire expanded south into Syria, it came into direct conflict with another great superpower of the age, the New Kingdom of Egypt. For centuries, Syria was a contested buffer zone between these two mighty empires. Both the Hittite king and the Egyptian pharaoh wanted to control the region's wealthy cities and vital trade routes. This rivalry led to a period of intense diplomatic maneuvering, political intrigue, and, ultimately, open warfare. The relationship between the Hittites and the Egyptians defined the international politics of the late Bronze Age, as smaller vassal states were often forced to choose sides between the two giants. The competition between the Hittites and Egypt reached its peak in the 13th century BCE. The ambitious Egyptian pharaoh, Ramesses II, was determined to reclaim the territories in Syria that his predecessors had lost to the Hittites. The powerful Hittite king, Muwatalli II, was equally determined to defend his empire's southern frontier. This clash of wills led to one of the most famous battles of the ancient world, the Battle of Kadesh. In 1274 BCE, the massive armies of the Hittites and the Egyptians met near the city of Kadesh, in what is now modern-day Syria. It was a colossal confrontation involving thousands of chariots and tens of thousands of infantry soldiers. The Battle of Kadesh was a tactical masterpiece of deception and strength. The Hittite king, Muwatalli II, cleverly concealed his main force and lured the advancing Egyptian army into a trap. The Hittite chariots launched a surprise attack that shattered one of the Egyptian divisions and nearly led to the capture of Ramesses II himself. The pharaoh managed to rally his troops and launch a counterattack, leading to a brutal and bloody stalemate. Both sides claimed victory after the battle. Ramesses II covered the walls of Egyptian temples with grand inscriptions and reliefs, celebrating his supposed triumph. The Hittite records, however, tell a different story, indicating that they maintained control of Kadesh and the surrounding territory. In the years following the indecisive battle, both empires realized that neither could completely defeat the other. The constant warfare was draining their resources and creating instability. Around 1258 BCE, Ramesses II and the new Hittite king, Hattusili III, decided to make peace. They negotiated the world's first known surviving international peace treaty. Copies of this treaty, recorded on clay tablets in the Hittite capital and on silver tablets in Egypt, have been found by archaeologists. The treaty established a permanent border between the two empires and promised mutual defense against any outside aggressor. This historic agreement marked the end of decades of conflict and began a new era of peaceful relations, sealed by the marriage of a Hittite princess to the Egyptian pharaoh. For over 4 centuries, the Hittite Empire had been a dominant power in the Near East. It had survived internal rebellions, succession crises, and epic wars with rival empires. Yet, around the year 1200 BCE, this mighty empire suddenly and catastrophically collapsed. The great capital city of Hattusa was violently destroyed and abandoned, never to be reoccupied. Across Anatolia, other Hittite cities and administrative centers met a similar fate. The sophisticated system of government, the literate bureaucracy, and the powerful military machine all vanished in a remarkably short period. The end of the Hittite Empire was part of a wider event known as the Late Bronze Age collapse. The reasons for this sudden collapse are complex and still debated by historians. It was likely not one single event, but a combination of several devastating factors that created a perfect storm. One major problem was internal weakness. The Hittite royal family was plagued by infighting and struggles for the throne. Ambitious relatives and powerful nobles often challenged the authority of the king, leading to civil wars that weakened the state from within. This internal political instability made the empire vulnerable to other threats and unable to respond effectively to crises when they arose. The empire was fragile at its core. External pressures also played a crucial role. Around this time, a mysterious group of raiding seafarers, known in Egyptian records as the Sea Peoples, began to attack coastal cities throughout the eastern Mediterranean. These raids disrupted trade routes, destroyed cities, and caused widespread chaos. While there is no direct evidence that the Sea Peoples destroyed Hattusa, which was far inland, their activities would have crippled the Hittite economy by cutting off access to vital trade and resources. The Hittites also faced ongoing threats from traditional enemies, like the Kaska peoples in the mountainous north, who may have taken advantage of the empire's weakness to launch devastating attacks. Perhaps the most critical factor was environmental change. Evidence from tree rings and pollen analysis suggests that the entire Near East experienced a period of severe and prolonged drought at the end of the 13th century BCE. This climate change would have led to widespread crop failures and famine across the Hittite homeland. A state as centralized as the Hittite Empire, with its large cities and armies, depended on a reliable surplus of grain. Without enough food, the social and political structure would have broken down. People would have abandoned the cities in search of food, and the king would have lost his ability to control the population and feed his army, leading to a complete system collapse. The collapse of the Hittite Empire around 1200 BC was swift and complete, but it was not the end of the Hittite story. In the power vacuum left by the fall of Hattusa, smaller successor states emerged in southern Turkey and northern Syria. These are known as the Neo-Hittite or Syro-Hittite kingdoms. They preserved many aspects of Hittite culture, including their art, architecture, and religious beliefs, for several more centuries. These small kingdoms continued to use a hieroglyphic script for their monumental inscriptions, and their art shows a clear continuation of Hittite styles. They were the last embers of a once great fire, keeping the memory of the Hittite name alive until they were eventually conquered by the expanding Assyrian Empire. The most tangible legacy of the Hittites lies buried in the earth. The rediscovery of their civilization in the 19th and 20th centuries was one of the great achievements of modern archaeology. The excavation of Hattusa and other sites, and especially the discovery of the vast royal archives, has revolutionized our understanding of the ancient Near East. These texts have given us an intimate look at the politics, law, religion, and daily life of a major Bronze Age power. The decipherment of the Hittite language was also a landmark achievement, opening up a whole new branch of Indo-European language studies and pushing back the history of this language family by 1,000 years. The Hittites made several significant contributions that influenced the course of history. Their legal system, with its emphasis on compensation rather than retaliation, stands out as a remarkably progressive achievement in the ancient world. Their skill in diplomacy and international relations is another key part of their legacy. The Treaty of Kadesh, the world's first detailed surviving peace treaty, is a powerful symbol of their ability to choose diplomacy over perpetual conflict. It serves as an ancient precedent for modern international law and conflict resolution, showing that even the bitterest of rivalries can be ended through negotiation and mutual respect. Studying the Hittites offers us valuable lessons even today. Their story is a powerful reminder of the fragility of even the mightiest civilizations. It shows how a combination of internal strife, external threats, and environmental change can bring a great empire to its knees. The Hittites demonstrate the importance of strong but just governance, the benefits of diplomacy, and the need for resilience in the face of adversity. For centuries, they were a lost empire, a footnote in the texts of others. Now, thanks to the work of archaeologists and linguists, the Hittites have reclaimed their rightful place in history, enriching our collective human story with their unique and fascinating civilization.